The siren of the ambulance, a shriek of raw urgency, tore through the city streets of Ethelberg, a chilling reminder of human frailty. Inside the vehicle, the air was thick with a silent panic, punctuated only by the rhythmic beep of a monitor and the strained, shallow breaths of Eleanor Vance, lying on the stretcher. Her skin was clammy, her hands gripping a thin blanket as she fought for every inhalation. Beside her, Marcus Thorne kept his gaze fixed on his wife, Eleanor. Every passing second felt like a wound in his chest. In this desperate race against time, there was no room for error, no tolerance for delay. Jerome Baker, the driver, gripped the steering wheel, his jaw clenched, eyes frantically searching for an opening in the traffic that seemed to move at an agonizing crawl despite the incessant wail of the siren. In the back, a paramedic worked with quick, practiced movements to stabilize Eleanor, muttering medical jargon that barely registered with Marcus. His entire world was narrowed to his wife's face, a portrait of a soul teetering on the edge of a deep, dangerous sleep. "Hold on, my love, just a little longer," Marcus whispered, leaning in as if his proximity could tether her to life. Then the world lurched. The ambulance braked abruptly, violently shaking everyone inside. Jerome slammed his fist on the dashboard, disbelief etched on his face. What in the devil is that man doing? Standing directly in the path of the emergency vehicle, a uniformed police officer held up a hand in an authoritative stop signal, completely ignoring the flashing lights and the insistent siren. Marcus felt a cold wave of dread give way to burning indignation. Who dared to obstruct a vehicle carrying his wife's life? Officer Grant Hadley approached the driver's side window with an air of absolute self-importance, his shoulders rigid, his eyes glazed with the kind of arrogance that feels untouchable under the shield of a uniform. Jerome rolled down the window a few inches, his voice tight with urgency. "Officer, we have a critical patient. We need to pass immediately." Hadley remained unmoved. His expression hardened, and his tone was icy. "Step out of the vehicle. I need to verify your documentation and speak with the driver." Marcus's eyes widened with fury. "My wife is dying in here. Don't you understand?" he shouted, his desperation palpable as Eleanor let out a weak moan that seemed to confirm his every word. The air outside grew heavy. A few pedestrians began to stop, drawn by the bizarre spectacle of an ambulance being halted by the very hand that should protect it. Hadley, however, crossed his arms and shook his head dismissively, almost enjoying the tension he had sown. Inside the ambulance, the paramedic's voice broke the charged silence for the first time. "If we don't reach St. Jude's Hospital in 5 minutes, her condition may become irreversible." Those words struck Marcus like an unavoidable hammer, reminding him that every lost second was pulling Eleanor closer to the abyss. "Let us pass," he demanded, his hand resting on the door, his voice not trembling with fear, but with the terrifying certainty that he could not let this moment dictate his wife's fate. Hadley responded with a look of pure contempt, raising his voice just enough for the onlookers to hear. "Rules are rules, and I'm in charge here." That sentence, a clear example of misused power, ignited a fire in Marcus. His thoughts raced, picturing Eleanor fading, his family receiving a call that should never happen. He was trapped between an unjust authority and the relentless march of time. The murmur of the gathering crowd began to swell. Cell phones were raised like silent witnesses. Marcus leaned over Eleanor, caressing her damp forehead. "I won't let this end here. I swear it." As he looked up, his eyes met Hadley's. In that brief exchange, a spark of defiance flared, a sign that not everyone was willing to submit to injustice disguised as order. Hadley, sensing the public pressure, chose to escalate, banging his palm sharply against the metal of the ambulance door, a harsh, humiliating sound. "You think you can just drive through without showing me your papers? You don't call the shots here, I do." Marcus felt the heat of shame and rage creep up his neck. The paramedic, sweating from the stress, yelled, "Officer, we have a critical patient. No time for games." "Silence," Hadley retorted, his demand crushing the medical urgency and exposing his cruelty to the stunned passersby. I decide when this vehicle moves. The crowd's murmuring grew into audible frustration. That's not right, a woman whispered. Let them pass, for God's sake, shouted a man from the pavement. But Hadley stood firm, his voice ringing with obstinance. Nobody moves until I say so. And you all better remember who has the power here. Marcus took a deep breath, fighting the urge to lash out. Officer, he said, his voice firm but strained, my wife is dying, and every minute you take from us could cost her life. Hadley let out a short, dry, cruel laugh. I don't care who she is or what she has. Things are done my way here. The police officer, blinded by his own pride, did not realize he had crossed an irreversible line. The irregular beeping of the monitor grew sharper. Eleanor's condition was worsening rapidly. Marcus knew he could not wait for a miracle. He had to act. This is unacceptable, he muttered, the words barely audible inside the vehicle. Yet they sounded like a roar of commitment to himself. Hadley, oblivious to the change in Marcus, wrenched open the ambulance door. Everyone out. Now, he commanded. Marcus rose slowly. His eyes locked with Hadley's, and in that gaze, there was no pleading, no fear, only a quiet, terrifying resolve. The crowd held its breath. I don't care who you think you are. I don't care what uniform you wear, Marcus said, his voice surprisingly calm and clear, cutting through the silence. What you are doing is risking my wife's life. Hadley sneered, but the crowd reacted with a roar of indignation, a collective sound that enveloped the scene with a force that surpassed any order. The phones captured the officer's image as a man losing control. If Eleanor dies here because of you, Marcus continued, his voice steady, you will have to answer to every one of these witnesses and to the conscience of an entire city. That sentence, an undeniable truth, silenced the officer. The power he had sought to wield so cruelly crumbled under the weight of an exposed truth. Hadley tried to maintain his posture, but his hands trembled visibly. The mounting pressure of public condemnation was unbearable. The paramedics seized the moment. It's time to go. We can't lose another second. Jerome, the driver, didn't wait for permission. He put the ambulance in gear, and the vehicle lurched forward, forcing Hadley to stumble back or be hit. The officer stood paralyzed in the middle of the street, a defeated figure surrounded by the cameras and the condemning eyes of the crowd. As the ambulance finally moved, the siren, now sounding like a trumpet of victory, the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Marcus looked back and saw the defiant faces of the people, their dignity restored at the St. Jude's Hospital. Eleanor was rushed into the emergency room. Her life was saved thanks to the few minutes gained and to Marcus's unyielding stand. Within days, the videos of the incident went viral. Officer Grant Hadley was suspended and, after a swift internal investigation driven by public outcry, was ultimately dismissed. Marcus and Eleanor's story became a symbol of resistance. As Eleanor slowly recovered, Marcus whispered to her, "Your struggle was not in vain, my love." It woke something up in all of us. The memory of that day remained, a luminous scar on the city's collective conscience. It was a testament to the truth that true authority is rooted in humanity, and the greatest force in the world is the dignity of a person who refuses to be silenced. The ambulance was saved, but more importantly, the collective voice of Ethelberg was found.